Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Trial Show. This is going to be focusing all on jumps racing, as we're only a fortnight out from the May Carnival at Warrnambool, and a number of horses are really starting to build up their preparations for the three-day spectacular. Joining us on the program is our resident jumps racing expert here on Racing.com and leading trainer in Shane Jackson. Jacko, you must be getting excited only a fortnight out from the Bull.
Yeah, I'm not sure about expert, but yeah, I'll take that one. But yeah, no, we can't wait. You know, Warrnambool Carnival, especially for the locals, is one we build up to. We start setting plans basically from last year, but from Christmas on, then it's really sort of building up and getting horses ready. So it's only around the corner now. It sneaks up on you. So yeah, we can't wait. We
had a big set of trials on Monday, 2 chase trials at Warrnambool and 6 hurdle trials at Terang. How important are these to get the horses sort of finishing touches going into the May Carnival?
Oh, hugely important, and the same as that, it's your last chance to trial over the hill here at Warrnambool every year for safety reasons, and it's a great initiative. You have to trial over the hill to get your ticket, because it's a tricky course. You jump doubles and cross roads, so if you were to go out there without having practice, it could end in disaster. So all horses must have a look at the hill, and some horses that are swapping from hurdles maybe early in the season over steeplechase fences towards the carnival, it was their last chance to qualify. So great set of trials, and then you have the likes of your Duke of Bedfords and that coming back for their last hit out as they're headed for their, you know, the Grand Annual. Even though it's early in the season, it can be a lot of horses' grand final, so you need to tick all the boxes. It's not a race you can go into with any stones left unturned.
He was the star of the carnival last year in Duke of Bedford, winning the Brierley on the Tuesday and the Grand Annual on Thursday. This was his chase trial, and he's been racing in some flat races so far this in 2026, but we'll take on the coverage here with Rick Mack calling the action. A nice piece of work from Duke of Bedford.
The big obstacles today over that one, all right, in front of Two Waters, who's doing the same. So they've leapt the first, and they're making their way, well, in direction of Brierley, because that's where they're headed. They jump the second. Duke of Bedford out in front. Count Zero, he'll be chasing him in the annual. Third placing Seneca, he's outside, and the great Charlie Messy-Hair was 4th. They were followed in turn then by Point Nepean, and Two Waters is at the end. They've graced the course proper, but only for a brief moment. They've jumped the one at Elford Road, which is going to take them to the next assignment, which is a trek up the hill of Brierley. That's why they're here. Duke of Bedford, he's out in front by 3 lengths to Count Zero. Seneca's a neck away third, and 3 lengths to Charlie Messy-Hair. 3 lengths further back to Point Nepean, and Two Waters was the last one. The first in Brierley's been completed by the 6 runners, and now the second. And Duke of Bedford in his favoured role. It's how he won the Brierley and the annual, setting his own tune out in front. He's 3 lengths clear from Count Zero, who's sticking with him, and third placing is Seneca. 4th, Charlie Messy-Hair, then Point Nepean, and Two Waters as last of the 6. They've jumped the 3 in Brierley while they climbed the hill, and they're now at the top, or almost, as they get to Cox's. And Duke of Bedford will jump the first, cross the road, and jump the second. He's 5 lengths in front of Count Zero. A last start winner here on this course. 5 lengths away then to Charlie Messy-Hair and Seneca, then Point Nepean and also Two Waters. Duke of Bedford is going at a fair tempo. He's not here for a look around. He comes down towards the Tozer Road double with Count Zero. Also after a hit out, he's trying his best to stick with him as they jump the Tozer Road double. He's only a few behind him. They're about 5 back to Charlie Messy-Hair and Seneca, then Point Nepean and Two Waters. So 4 fences to go in this trial, and Duke of Bedford for Professor Pateman. He's lost nothing in his jumping. He's 3 or 4 lengths in front of Count Zero. A gap to Seneca, then Charlie Messy-Hair. Point Nepean hasn't been asked for an effort yet, and last of all was Two Waters ditto. So there's 2 to jump. Duke of Bedford, he goes into Steeple Lane by 5 lengths on Count Zero. 8 away, Seneca's running third. But the Duke, it was the scene of his greatest triumphs, the Brierley Grand Annual double last year. He's over the second last, no problems. He looks like he's absolutely loved it to be back here too. Let's hope he loves it as much in a couple of weeks, where the real pain comes when you've got to win these, go to war in these races, like the Brierley and the Grand Annual. But I'm sure he will, because he's loving this. He's 5 lengths in front of Count Zero, who's trialled well. Seneca next. Duke of Bedford's going to be asked to finish off by Pateman, though. He quickens a little as he comes down with 100 metres to go. The scene of his greatest triumphs, Duke of Bedford, comes on and trials like he could do it all again in a couple of weeks. He was 7 lengths to Count Zero.
So a dashing display there from Duke of Bedford as he continues his preparation for Warrnambool and the May Carnival. First and foremost, Jacko, your thoughts there of Duke of Bedford and what level he's going to get to this preparation?
Oh, look, he's been beautifully managed. I know Bob's for a fact has been looking after his mark, his handicap mark, and he has avoided, winning one of those steeplechases before the carnival. He's given him plenty of flat runs and a couple of trials, and he was obviously there for a solid hit out. He looked brilliant. Bar the third last, he was asked for a stride that wasn't there, and he was very lucky that the horse was as clever as he was, that he didn't sell out, because that could have been a disaster. But other than that, he was foot perfect. Count Zero is probably the only one out of that trial that would be headed towards an annual. That would be, I don't think he'd be a danger to him, but he's obviously won one before. The rest of them, I would imagine, will be going to that 120 chase. So, albeit he didn't beat much, he couldn't have done it any nicer, and the way he stretched from the back of the last, he looks to be ticking along beautifully.
Well, the trainer of Duke of Bedford is Andrew Bobbin. He's been good enough to join us on this special edition of the trial show. And Andrew, what did you take out of that trial on Monday?
I think Jacko wrapped it up very well there. It was important, if you're in a Grand Annual, that you do have to protect your weight. You'll see the last 4 winners have had 64 kilos, excuse me, where we're going to be 67, 68, somewhere like that this year. So he's had those 3 very good runs on the flat, and he just needed a good blow yesterday, because we saw him at Swan Hill 10 days ago and should have won over 2,400, but just didn't get a crack at them. So we wanted a testing trial yesterday, and he had a really good blow, recovered very well. So he's bang on track. He'll have a flat trial next week just to keep things ticking over at Horsham next Tuesday. And then I think the big talking point for the start of the carnival has got to be Duke of Bedford v Stern Idol in the Brierley, 2 horses that have made their mark in the game, 2 that have very similar racing patterns. Of course, the big focus for us is the Grand Annual, although the run on the Tuesday will do him no harm. We'll be going around for good prize money. We saw him finish off very well there in the trial. So 2 weeks today, and we'll see Will Gordon on top for both.
So was there any consideration to go straight into the Grand Annual, or do you feel he needs that run on the Tuesday to really sort of bring him on for the extended trip on the Thursday?
I think he went better on the Thursday last year than he did on the Tuesday. It's a tried and tested theory. There's been many of horses that have come through that annual, even in recent. It's come through the Brierley to the annual. They didn't have to win the Brierley to get to the annual, to win the annual, should I say? So I'm a big believer in not trying to reinvent the wheel. I get my horse fit enough, and obviously I've got to train him individually and not worry about what others have done in the past. But the guidelines have been set. He jumps very well. He's a naturally fit horse, so I've got no reasons at this point in time to not run him on the Tuesday in the annual.
Will Gordon was riding in races at Wodonga on Monday. I assume that's the reason why Steve Pateman was in the saddle. What was the feedback like from Steve, his first sit on Duke of Bedford?
Yeah, Steve said the horse feels very good, and there was 4 riders in the mix, and the decision was only made this morning. Tommy Ryan was the man who did all the early work on this horse, and I'd have loved to have seen Tommy on the horse, although the way it's worked out with there's more than just me who make the decisions, and I've got no problem at all with having Will Gordon on top. He rides winners every day of the week. He's got his eye in. Pateman, we know him as the professor. He was in the mix as well. And, of course, Lynchy, who did a wonderful job last year. Lynchy's fearless and suits this horse. So, in the end, we put it all into the mix, and Will came out on top, but it was extremely close. But back to your question, Pateman was extremely happy with the way that the horse is going, and he put his own hand up for the little mess at the third last. He said he just sat on him a little bit, and the horse took the jump on. So no concerns there. Jacko wrapped that up very well there from an expert's angle. But importantly, the horse is in great order and ready to rock and roll come 14 days.
Obviously, Duke of Bedford will be the main target for your stable. Anything else that you've got aimed up at Warrnambool, whether on the flat or in the jumps racing?
We saw Carbaran win the maiden at Warrnambool a month ago, and he ran fourth the other day at Terang. Drove home scratching my head thinking, what's happened with this horse? Because he went from 0 to hero very quickly. This Pushless horse went past him there at about the 800 when I thought we were really going to come into the race. But after just letting the dust settle and I think talking to a few trainers, a few jockeys, and seeing how the horses have recovered, I think a lot of us have got to put a line through that Terang meeting the other day. The ground was very gluey, very sticky, and my horse tried very, very hard, but he has no real form on heavy ground on the flat. And I think that just may have been the reason that we didn't see the best of him the other day at Terang, but he'll front up on the Thursday in the novice chase.
Well, thanks very much for your time, Andrew, and all the best there with Duke of Bedford heading towards the Brierley and Grand Annual.
Johnny boys, thank you.
So there is Andrew Bobbin. And, well, Shane Jackson, you also had Point Nepean going around in that first heat. What was the sort of reason to run there rather than sort of compete at Terang on the Sunday?
Purely because I wanted to keep options open, headed towards the carnival. You know, Jerry and his crew, they love winning no matter where it is. So I want to give him his best chance of winning a race at the carnival, because some of these owners are involved with Stern Idol, so they'll obviously be coming down. And look, he could have gone to Terang, and the way it worked out, as Andrew was just saying, with that horrible bluey ground, he's the type of horse he mightn't have enjoyed it that much either. So I think, you have to run a line through a lot of the Terang form headed towards the BOOL. But we said we'd qualify Point Nepean. I'd schooled him over the bigger fences before he won over hurdles at Hamilton, and he seemed to take to it quite well. And I think he probably has a brighter future over fences. He's a quality hurdler, but he might just, the Galleywood hurdle is going to be a proper race. Like, could he beat Highland Blaze if Highland Blaze is there on form? I don't know if he will, the way Highland Blaze is going. And a couple more, like you've Split and Golden Crusader, and a few of those that are quite handy horses. Not Split, Golden Crusader, I should say. So that was the thing. I think he's going to be very hard to beat in a 120 chase on the Wednesday on Galleywood Day, but we're still leaving both options open. I've said to the crew he'll be running on the Wednesday, whether it's in the Galleywood or the 120, but I would be leaning towards the 120. He popped around nice and safe, and we didn't ask him any questions, and Tommy said he really enjoyed it, so that'll be the way I'd be leaning at the minute.
The other steeple trial on Monday, the chase trial, was won by St Eustace with Steve Pateman in the saddle. These are the concluding stages. He jumped safe and was given, a good test in this. But you had Raise the Note, who's an interesting runner. So you opted to run at Terang on Sunday and then backed up to trial this mare on the Monday. She seemed to trial particularly well on that backup. Was that a tough decision to make, or was that something that you were keen to do to get a ticket sort of to head to the BOOL?
Correct, to get her ticket. Look, she went to Terang, and obviously we thought they're going to be very hard to beat. But the way this mare has been going, I know Rick gave her no chance early before the race. He said she shouldn't have been there, but she's seldom ran a bad race over jumps. She was getting in off a lovely weight, and you watched the race back a couple of times. I think she should have won. She just hung out after the last, and the jockey just unfortunately had the whip in the wrong hand, but that's all a learning caper too. But she ran a cracker, and we just gave her a soft trial the next day to get her ticket over the hill to have either the option of the 120 chase. But the more we've been thinking about it, I think we're probably leaning towards a tilt at the annual if we can get into the field.
That would be quite the task for her, because she's still eligible for a maiden hurdle, but you've always had quite an opinion of this mare.
She has, and look, she's probably not. She doesn't have the speed for some of the quality horses over hurdles. If you kept her going around over hurdles, I've no doubt she'll win a couple. But as I said previously, with Point Nepean, I want to aim her at races where she can go to some of the better races and be very competitive. Like, she'll get into an annual off 64 and raise the flag, no doubt about her staying. She's as tough as all boots. She's not very big, but she jumps fences a lot better than hurdles. She's good over hurdles, but she probably spends a little bit of time in the air, where over the steeplechase fences it just takes that little bit of speed out of the others. You know, those real quality hurdlers can just get away from you, and you'll see that with, say, the likes of Stern Idol. You know, he was very, very good over hurdles, but he was beatable over hurdles, whereas sort of 4,000 metres and less, he's nearly unbeatable over fences because he just gains that length or two over the bigger obstacles.
Well, it's a good wrap-up of the steeple trials or chase trials at Warrnambool on Monday. We're going to take a quick break on this special edition of the Trials Show. On the other side, we're going to look across at some of the hurdle trials that were run at Terang. Welcome back to a special edition of the Trial Show, looking at some of the jumps trials that were held earlier in the week. We're now switching to Terang, where we had a number of hurdle trials, and some of these horses could be heading towards maiden hurdles. One of those is Palentino Heights, who's had 2 jumps races. He was narrowly beaten in a maiden hurdle at Ballarat last season, Jacko, and he ran well at Hamilton only a couple of weeks back. Trained by Thomas Carberry and ridden by Tommy Carberry Jr. So good to see they're keeping it in the family.
Oh, it is, and for a lot of viewers that won't know, the Carberry name in jumps racing is royalty back home. You know, Paul Carberry, Philip Carberry, Nina Carberry, they were born and bred riding horses, and yeah, Tommy's over here now helping his dad, and he's trying to get his ticket to be able to ride over the jumps. He's ridden in some amateur races back home, I believe. Well, this Palentino Heights goes well. I reckon he should have probably won at Hamilton the previous start, and yeah, he went around here and he wasn't waiting for anybody. He let him go a good clip, but he jumped well, and he had plenty of horse getting through the line. Obviously, Tommy Carberry knows how to train a stayer, but I think he'll be a live chance heading towards the BOOL, and I'm sure that's where he'll be heading. Yeah,
I agree with that. Day one maiden hurdle looks ideal for him. Quinny Scott has been a legend of racing in Warrnambool and the region for many a year, and he's got a horse here that trialled particularly well in Wade to Go. Like a horse that last preparation didn't look as though he was sort of as forward as what he may be this time in. The time of this trial wasn't anything flash, but I wouldn't be reading too much into that. But I think it's just fantastic to see Quinny with a horse that may go into a day one maiden hurdle with somewhat of a chance.
That'd be absolutely brilliant, and I'd love nobody more than myself to get a winner, but I'd love to see Quinny get a winner, especially over the jumps. He's been one of the biggest supporters of it over the years. You know, he goes back winning Brierley's Grand Annuals, won every race, and he obviously doesn't have as many in work now, but he always tries to find one for the jumps every year. And I know this horse, I think he was a bit frustrating last season, just talking to Quinny about him. He was doing a few things wrong and he was over racing, a bit keen, but he seems to have put it together a little bit better this year. As you said, it wasn't a very fast trial, but he doesn't have to improve too much to be at least competitive in a maiden hurdle. Whether he can win at May, I'm not sure, but I'm sure during the year he'll be ticking one off, hopefully, for Quinny and the crew.
And Tom Davendig has firmly established himself as one of the leading trainers at Warrnambool on the flat races over the past couple of seasons, and he looks as though he's got more of an arsenal heading towards the jumps races this year. One of those could potentially be Jungle Jet, who was the winner of trial number 3, and I thought it trialled particularly well. And you had Andy Wynne in this, Shane. He'd raced on the flat on Sunday and then backed up to trial on Monday. Is he a chance to race at the May Carnival, or is it just going to come a little bit too soon for him?
No, he'll be racing on the Tuesday. He'll be going to the maiden hurdle on the first day. Andy Wynne, he wasn't in there to ask any questions. It was just an extra little bit of practice. I believe, you know, these hurdlers, if you can get 3 trials into them, it's brilliant. And they go to the races with plenty of experience. So I thought Andy Wynne was very good. He wasn't asked many questions late and he just cruised to the line. He does love soft testing ground, so hopefully there's plenty of juice in it on the first day for him. But as you were saying, Tom has a few nice jumpers for this season. Last year he had 1 or 2 maybe. But he's lined a few up this year, and he's done the same thing. He's given them all sort of 3 jumps trials. They're all jumping very well. They're ones that have a bit of flat ability. So, yeah, I reckon Tom, like us all, he'll be trying to win every race he can at the carnival. But it's great to see him with a few more jumpers, because, yeah, the more these big trainers, big name trainers, that target the jumps, the better it is for the sport.
Yeah, we're going to take another quick break here on the trial show, and on the other side we're going to look at a couple more from the Davenig stable that were in the later heats at Terang. Welcome back to a special edition of the trial show, looking at the jumps horses heading towards the May Carnival. We go down to heat number 4 from Terang on Monday, which was taken out by Kawaya, who's from the Tom Davenig stable. So another one that has had a couple of trials earlier in the year and then has showed a fair bit of intent here. But Jacko, I'm keen to ask you about True Test here from the Paul Pruska stable. A horse that's a maiden on the flat, hasn't been overly exposed, but I've liked the way that this horse has trialled, and I think he's got quite the future at the jumps.
100%, I'm with you there, BZ. Obviously, Paul has seen something in him to go this route, because, as we know, Paul has trained Grand National winners and knows the time of day, and especially knows how to get these sort of horses fit. He'd want to, as you've seen there, he probably wants to tidy up his jumping a little bit, but Kawhi is a smart horse, and this trial was ran in a very quick time, and the boys weren't leaving much out there. So, yeah, no, I'm with you. He's a horse that could break the mould. You know, we see a lot of them now coming through as classy flat horses that change the way, but this could be one that might break the mould and just found his niche over jumps, and maybe wasn't good enough for the flat.
No, moving on to heat number 5, Jabberwockies was able to win this, beating Galileus, and we're talking about horses that have, you know, classier flat form. Jabberwockies, trained by Tom Davenig, had been a Metropolitan Saturday winner, and Galileus had formerly been with the Freedmans and now with Paul Pruska, and hasn't, only a couple of starts ago, was able to win at Sandown over a staying trip. These are the sort of obvious horses that now start to take to jumps racing, and they seem to be progressing quite well. What did you take out of this trial?
Yeah, this is probably one of my favourite trials of the day. I really like Jabberwockies. You know, he was a classy flat galloper, and he looks to be going really well and enjoying it. I didn't mind the trial of the bobbin horse in third, either the grey horse. I thought he went quite well. So yeah, I think you'll find the first 3 in this trial, if they all turn up at May Carnival, they're going to be running big races. Now, I'm not sure they're all going that way, but you would imagine with the intent was shown in the trials that it would be. But for me, I know it wasn't the quickest trial of the day, but that doesn't always matter. Like, they went a bit slower early, but they definitely ran their last 400 a bit quicker, and I'd say it would have been the trial of the morning to take out of it. Yeah,
Farrago's a horse that has made quite the impression at the May Carnival previously on the flat. He's run second in a Jericho Cup. He's finished 4th in a Geelong Cup. He ran 4th in a Warrnambool Cup last year. So his flat form is of high quality. Now, he's had 4 hurdle trials, 2 last year and now 2 this year, where he's been undefeated and just looked to be travelling so well out wide there in the pink colours. Do you suspect he may be on a jumps campaign this time around, or is there still a little bit more life left even him in the flat races?
Who would know? Who would know? He's been trialling very well for the last couple of seasons, but it also seems to spark him up enough that he puts in a real good flat run after a trial. So I would say Pat Ryan will keep his options open. I'd say you'll see him nominated in the maiden hurdle. I'd say you'll see him nominated in a Warrnambool Cup also. So I'd say he'll leave that decision until a bit later on, but he certainly jumps brilliantly. And whenever he does turn up in a maiden hurdle, he's going to be damn hard to beat because he has the quality. But that was a good trial too. You had Bright Legend there who was a winner of a Tourney Night Cup, and my horse Shamarkand I don't think goes too bad either. He just lost his way a little bit on the flat, so he'll go for the maiden hurdle at May Carnival, and I'd be pretty hopeful that he'll be running a big race. So I think our last 2 trials, our last 2 heats of the morning at Terang, there's definitely something to follow.
Just on that, Shamarkand, so a pick-up from Gay Waterhouse and Adrian Bott, an imported galloper that had a fair CV before sort of arriving with you. How have you found him?
Yeah, he's a funny little horse. He's not over big. He doesn't have a huge big action. He's put on plenty of condition since he come down. I think maybe city life didn't suit him as much. He spends a lot of his time down the beach. He's doing plenty of schooling. We've given him a couple of flat runs. They haven't been terrible, but we've we've not been going there hopeful. We just want to sort of get him to start passing a horse and get his confidence back. And I think maybe the best way to do it could be go the jumping option to see if we can't get not an easy kill. There's no easy kill, but see if we can't win a couple of races over the jumps and spark him up that he can be a dual purpose horse, because he's not old. He hasn't raced a heap. And if I could get him back to somewhere near his best form, he's certainly a handy horse on the flat. So that's sort of the project at the minute, but everything seems good and he seems to be loving his routine. So yeah, the Tuesday at May Carnival, he can go around, and yeah, hopefully we're competitive, and then, as I said, we can mix his campaign during the year.
Who are the highlight horses for you heading towards May?
Obviously, I suppose be very hopeful with Highland Blaze into Galleywood. You know, he did a sensational job last year, won 4 hurdle races, winning the Grand National, and he's come back in great form. You know, with a few going around, as I mentioned, Shamark Hand raised the note in the annual. We'll have a bunch on the flat as well. Stern Idol obviously was devastating at Terang, but you just worry. It was a very hard race for your first up run over 3,800. He was set alight a long way from home, so if that hasn't taken anything out of him, they'll do very, very well to beat him in the Brierley, because, as I said, anything sort of 4,000 or below, he's so deadly over his fences. They just struggle to stay with him. So he's the poster boy. He's our pin-up boy of racing. So hopefully he is there in as good a form as what he normally is. And I've no doubt with Kieran in the helm, he will be. But Stern Idol, looking forward to him. Looking forward to my lad in the Galleywood. Duke of Bedford, obviously, we love seeing him going around, and I'll raise the note in there. But some great jumps racing to be had at the Carnival.
Well, thanks very much for your time, Jacko. Appreciate it. Looking forward to all your insights at May. That's it for the trial show. See you soon.